Battle is raging for control of the Libyan capital, Tripoli. Rebel forces streamed into the city overnight. Armed residents in Tripoli joined up with them in jubilation and took over Green Square, previously the scene of pro-Gaddafi demonstrations.
But there's fighting in several places, including around Colonel Gaddafi's residence. Here's a summary of the fast-moving developments inside Libya. Hundreds of rebels have swept into Tripoli from the west, though they initially met little resistance entering the city. Fighting has now broken out in several places.
In Green Square, in the heart of Tripoli, there were jubilant scenes as the rebels reached the capital.
The rebels have captured Colonel Gaddafi's son, Saif al-Islam. The International Criminal Court has indicted him for torturing and killing civilians. Another of Gaddafi's son, Mohammed, has also been detained.
NATO has confirmed that its mission in Libya will continue as long as civilians need protection. Catherine Downs reports on the latest.
The rebel army stream into the city they stormed overnight, the heart of Colonel Gaddafi's empire, the Libyan capital. Symbolically, Green Square in the centre of Tripoli, a former bastion of Gaddafi support, has been renamed Martyr Square. A convoy of hundreds is heading there, confident the capital is theirs. Hours after occupying parts of the city, rebels are setting up checkpoints.
They lose control. So all the army of Gaddafi now, they fight without any order, without anything.
Colonel Gaddafi himself seems to have vanished, but the rebels are closing in on his family. Gaddafi's son, Saif al-Islam, has been arrested. These amateur pictures appear to show rebel fighters storming the house of his daughter, Aisha, yesterday. And another of his sons has, it seems, surrendered. Mohammed Gaddafi gave a dramatic phone interview to the Arabic channel Al Jazeera.
I'm being attacked right now. This is gunfire inside my house. They're inside my house.
But this is not yet a city fully under rebel control. Fighting has continued throughout the night. This morning, tanks have fired on rebels trying to enter Gaddafi's compound. Around 15 to 20% of Tripoli remains under government control. Above the rooftops of Misrata, though, fireworks welcome the news from the capital. And they rejoiced in Benghazi too, the home of the opposition's political movement. The implications for the country as a whole are still unclear, but for now, in the immediate aftermath of what seems like victory, it's a warm welcome for the rebels on their way to Martyr Square. Catherine Downs, BBC News.
Our correspondent Rana Jawad has been covering events from Tripoli throughout this entire conflict. We can speak to her now. Rana, good to hear from you. Tell me, what's the latest? What is happening in Tripoli now? What are you hearing?
Well, we can certainly still hear NATO jets flying over the capital. We've also been hearing occasional gunshots being fired. We don't know whether it's remnants of celebratory gunfire or something else. It's quite difficult to roam around at the moment. I have had a reliable source just come back from a short trip about 10 minutes away from where we are in the eastern part of the city, and what would have taken a 10-minute drive on a normal day took about an hour and a half to reach, because there are checkpoints every 100 to 200 meters or so, manned by residents of different districts as well as armed fighters. They are very much still trying to maintain public order, and as far as my source could see, it's been very well organized. However, as you mentioned earlier, there are still some battles raging on in different parts of the capital.
Rana, it sounds as if the rebels are particularly organised. Is this surprising, or is this an accumulation of months of trying to train, trying to learn on the job, so to speak?
It's a combination of both. I think that there was some fear initially that things would break down in terms of public order once an uprising began here in the capital, and when rebel fighters would arrive from outside the city. However, it would appear so far as though everyone was well organized, and And I think it's more of a sense of neighborhood security. Even in our area alone, all the men from the different houses around really haven't slept in the past 48 hours, and they're just manning their own checkpoints on the streets that lead to their homes. So they are wary of any kind of outside movement or any strangers coming into their areas, and it is being done for security reasons, because obviously it's not over yet. Colonel Gaddafi, as far as we know, is still in power, and there are still a lot of unanswered questions at this time.
Rana, you say it's not over yet, but still, is there a feeling of finality today?
I haven't spoken to a lot of people, but I can say in the early hours of today, mosques here were still chanting out "God is great" and singing the national anthem of the old monarchy before Colonel Gaddafi came into power. So I think they are very much still, they still firmly believe that the end is near. However, there is a sense that it might take another day or two, perhaps maybe only hours, but some people are still on edge. They don't know what's happening in other parts of the city, and given reports of fighting still happening in other parts that are closer to downtown Tripoli, there is a sense of nervousness as to what could come next. There have also been reports of snipers being stationed in Omar al-Mukhtar Street, which is just off of Green Square, where celebrations took place overnight. Also in Tariq al-Shat, which is a coastal road that leads to Maitiga Airport, which is supposed to be under the control of the rebels. But there are reports of snipers being stationed there.
Rana Jawad in Tripoli, thank you for bringing us up to date.
Well, Gaddafi's forces are putting up a fight with pockets of resistance across the city. This is what our correspondent Rupert Wingfield-Hayes found out this morning when he travelled into the capital with rebel forces.
But generally this morning, as we've come into Tripoli, very, very quiet. A few sounds of shooting in the background. But here we go. Here's a group of young men on the corner here. This is what we're seeing every time we go past. Groups of young men celebrating. So far, no signs of any fighting in the city. Everything looks very quiet. So we've just come into, well, we're approaching the centre of Tripoli down ahead of us here. We've come up against this roadblock here. They say there's still fighting going on up ahead here. They say there are a few Gaddafi soldiers still up ahead. So they're bringing up rebel fighters. They just passed us in a car here, going up ahead. Where is Gaddafi?
Gaddafi, nobody here know. Zenga, maybe in there. Maybe under there. Maybe just mouse. Gaddafi mouse. Maybe here, sir.
He's hiding somewhere.
It's so deep, but he can't go there because he's scared. He's scared so much.
Well, although it appears very quiet on the surface here in Tripoli this morning, it's also clearly still extremely tense, and there are still parts of the city that are not under the rebels' control, and there is still resistance going on here. Then we came across a convoy heading into the city. Little did these young fighters know what lay in store for them ahead. We decided to follow them as they headed along the seafront towards the city centre. Up ahead, there are still signs of fighting. But then we ran straight into an ambush. We saw a 20mm anti-aircraft cannon firing directly into the front of our convoy. We got a clear that despite the overnight celebrations, this is still a city that is far from safe or secure. Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, BBC News, in Tripoli.
Well, let's speak to Rupert now. He joins us on the phone. And Rupert, where are you now and how much fighting is still going on?
Well, Matthew, we understandably, as you might understand, after that little encounter, we pulled out to the west of Tripoli, retreating down the road towards Zawiya to regroup. We have been with a group of rebels for days who are from the Mafusa mountains in western Libya. We've got to know them quite well. Now, they have moved into the city this morning. And we're in touch with them. They appear to have come across quite stiff resistance. They've told us that they are moving through the suburbs of the city, but they are getting sniped at. They're getting incoming sniper fire regularly, and they're essentially having to go street by street, securing each street as they go. So it sounds like it's still a very hairy situation, particularly in the west of the city. I think what you have to understand is that Tripoli has now essentially started to fragment into its different communities. The east of the city, which is quite poor and industrial, is very pro the rebels, and we understand that it is fairly quiet and secure, and they've set up roadblocks, and there has been a sort of general uprising in that area, which is securing that area for the rebels. In the west, which is the area of the city we moved through this morning, it's a very different story. It's much more pro-Gaddafi, it's much wealthier, there are big villas along the coast there. That area is now extremely dangerous, with lots of sniping and lots of fighting still going on.
Clearly the situation is incredibly fluid at the moment. We've had, though, months of stalemate, but when the end has come, it has come pretty quickly, hasn't it?
The end has come much more quickly than any of us thought. When we were walking down the road to Tripoli from Zawiya yesterday morning, we were asking ourselves, can this really be the push on Tripoli? Surely there is going to be they're going to stand and fight outside the gates of Tripoli. And yet all resistance yesterday just melted away as the rebels just drove straight into the centre of the city. It could be that there is no morale, there is no real support from the military for Gaddafi, and that the military has just melted away, and that there are just a few people clinging on. But there is also another thing people are talking about now, which is potentially the rebels are being drawn into an ambush, that they may be drawn into being encircled in the city, and that there will be a counter-offensive by Gaddafi's forces, that they have not disappeared, but they are hiding out in the city, and that there could be a counterattack. We simply don't know, but I can tell you from what we saw this morning and what we're hearing now, it appears that this is not yet over.
And exactly as you are describing, we're hearing that tanks are apparently heading towards Green Square, and we still don't know where Colonel Gaddafi actually is, and until that moment of surrender, or whether he's taken, that really will be the moment where this realistically ends.
Absolutely, Matthew. I think this is the crucial thing now. If Gaddafi can be caught, then perhaps his supporters will throw in the towel and there won't be any further bloodshed. But it appears that he has decided, unlike his sons, who appear to have given themselves up peacefully, Colonel Gaddafi appears to have decided that he is going to fight to the end, that he is going to make a last stand wherever he is, whether he's in his compound hiding out there or somewhere else in the country. The sad thing about that means that the fighting is going to continue longer, and there is going to be more bloodshed and potentially more destruction in the centre of Tripoli than there might have been.
Rupert Wingfield-Hailes, thanks once again. Thank you.
World leaders have been acknowledging the apparent beginning of the end of Colonel Gaddafi's rule. The European Union said it's making plans for a Libya without Mr. Gaddafi. NATO confirmed that its mission to protect civilians in Libya continues. Its Secretary General and